Welcome back, everybody, to Stuff That Matters Now. I am in Auckland somewhere, and I am interviewing Christina Wedgwood, who has just written a fabulous book that I have read, cover to cover. It is covered in green marker pen because it's so good. And I haven't met Christina until today in person. We've talked online before. So, Christina, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for agreeing to this podcast.
It's an honour.
And I have loved the book.
Thanks.
And we're going to have that as the focus of the book. Before we do that, how would you describe yourself? What are you? What are you?
Me? I'm many things. I guess I'm a mum first. I can't not say that. But I'm an introverted extrovert, in that I get energy from talking to other people and being with other people, but I am also terribly shy and unsure of myself. I am a writer. I am a reader. I am a learner. I should say I'm a wife if I said I was a mum. There's some of the hats that I wear. I'm a business owner, but I don't think of myself as a leader, interestingly. I think I am, but I find that label still challenging. I don't know why.
And the book is called Better. Because
Yes.
why?
Because it's funny, the title came really late in the piece. And I think that was because I had tried some other things first. One of them that was nearly there but didn't quite stick was a bigger sandpit. And that was because I wanted the book to create more space for more people and more voices. So, you can come and you can play here too, because we'll just make the sandpit bigger to accommodate everyone. But it came back to better because all of what we do, I use the word a lot in our business and our work, all of what we do is with the view to making things better for people. So we work with clients who have ideas that can make things better, or methods or frameworks or whatever, perspectives. But also what those people's contribution does is that it makes it better too. So we get better outcomes, we get better influence, we get better impact, we get better solutions if we are kind of taking the best of everyone. So yeah, I couldn't go when I thought that was the title, it couldn't have been anything else.
Christina, your business, so you mentioned the business, your business is called Intelligence Inc.
Intelligent Inc., yep.
I-N-K. Very clever. You have worked with other people to publish books?
Yes.
That's how we met, actually, wasn't it?
It is, yes, Alan.
And so you've transitioned. What's it like going from being a publisher of other people's books to doing your own?
I think you can't put a really great book or really great work out into the world and be unchanged. So to give that much of yourself to something that's an output changes you and transforms you anyway. And I've seen that happen to clients, but there is a special kind of existential crisis when it's your own, it's your own ideas that you're wrestling with. And also, I think writing a book is hard, and it's hard even if you are a good writer, and it's hard even if you have thought lots about your ideas. There's still something about, there are places you'll get tangled. There are structural things, challenges you've got to overcome. So I did definitely have an extra voice in my head saying, you're meant to be good at this. This is what you do. Why are you finding this hard? But luckily, some clever colleagues as well alongside me that talked me down a couple of times. I didn't expect it to be as I thought I knew how to write and finish a book. I think I counted I'd done about 18 or 19 before this one. But yeah, there's still something different about your own.
I did wonder about that, thinking, this is your baby. Mm-hmm. You've been a midwife for lots of others, and I'm not sure what midwives are like as patients having their own baby. I could imagine they're not great. But and look, the couple of things struck me. One, how useful it was for me.
That's good.
Because it aligned, and it's a funny thing, because I agreed with 95% of the stuff in the book. I thought, I really like this, and I go, is that a good thing or not?
Yeah.
So, I go, okay, so it's just affirming a whole lot of stuff, but that does feel quite good. The other thing was, you have done a huge amount of research and reading that you've referenced and popped in here. Now, your own thinking is there, I can see that, but you've put down all these influences in there. Mm-hmm. So is reading, because I'm not sure if reading and writing or reading and publishing, do they go together?
I think it's interesting. People have often asked us, because for the 13 or so years we've been in business, writing's always been a key part of what we do. So we started as a content agency. And so people ask us often, how do I become a better writer? And I'm like, is there a course you can take? Should I do a qualification in something? I'm like, well, you can. But I said, I always say my best advice is to read. Read lots and read a wide variety of things. Because I think you just, obviously someone did teach me to write at some stage, but not in the ways that I do now, if that makes sense, and not in the, in different, I don't remember being schooled in different styles necessarily, or, the fact that there are many ways that you can hang words together in a sentence, and some can serve different purposes to others or be superior to others. But I think you just pick that up a lot when you read and when you absorb words a lot and you experience what they make you feel, or different people's pacing or styles that I'm not reading any of those books to analyze them, but I think you do kind of learn that stuff as you go, whether you can articulate it or not. So I think reading does come with writing, and I think it comes with ideas. And I wanted to say on your point about it was nice to read something that you 95% agreed with. I think the second point you made about, well, yes, and there's a lot of research that backs that up, that in itself would have been quite validating too, because not only am I agreeing with your already formed point of view, I'm showing you how it's right as well, which through that research, which would have, that would feel good, I think, as a reader.
And when I say agree, there was new stuff in there for me, so it wasn't like going, oh, know that. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, that's good.
It was a book of discovery for me. And I got hooked when I ordered it. I got hooked just by reading some of the stuff on the back, when it was just like, and I think I told you at the time I had another book I needed to finish.
Yes, you did. You were holding off.
And holding off because I thought once I get into this, everything else is going to get blotted out, which was exactly right. So it promised a lot for me.
Good.
And it delivered. So I told you beforehand, I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
So I read a lot. And I love reading. And as somebody who's hearing impaired, reading is something that I've always enjoyed because I can do it as well as any other fucker.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's always really resonated for me. So I was reflecting on this, and I've showed Christina, the book is full of
green highlighter and
green
pen
highlighter.
marks.
And I haven't done that with many books. And so I've thought, where do I rank this book? And so of the hundreds of books I have read, I'd put this in my top 10.
Oh, my.
And because the message I took away has resonated for me is that we have got to make space for the quiet people to have a voice.
Absolutely.
And so yesterday I facilitated a 90-minute session in Auckland here, and that rang true. And you've got a quote in there about the Babel effect, that the politicians and so forth who talk a lot, we think they must know a lot, and the fact that's not true. And so yesterday I made a special point. In the last half hour, I went, okay, so all the noisy people have spoken now. Now from now, the last half hour, so the last third, I only want to hear from people that haven't talked yet.
Nice.
And it was still a stretch. And I had to prod people, and then the quiet people started talking. And totally affirmed what they were holding on to was quite something. And I thought, I've actually caused a change here by getting the quiet people to speak.
Nice.
And didn't they? And once they got the hang of it, it was just like this floodgate opened.
Awesome.
And that was directly from this book, so thank you.
You're very welcome. I think you also gave them a gift in letting them be the final third as well, because I think often the quiet ones we're quiet not because we've got nothing to say, but we're actually still thinking about it. You know, we're processing, and we can take a bit longer to do that sometimes than the ones that are there quickly with a ready answer. So you may not, I don't know, maybe we'll do that experiment, you may not have had the same reaction though had you have forced that in the first 30 minutes of your 90-minute session.
100% not, and I think it comes up in the book, is that there are fast processes and slow, and I process fast, but doesn't mean to say I'm brighter or more accurate than the people who process slow.
No.
And so... But it felt really, you know, when you've done something consciously and it's worked, like wasn't
felt like a win.
It wasn't a complete surprise. I was like, I did something and it worked, and we held new viewpoints that we hadn't heard already.
How cool!
And I thought, yep, that's directly from this book.
That's fantastic.
I didn't give you any credit for it at the time, Christine. I'm giving it to you now.
Thank you. Forgiven.
But it was, so that was, and I believe for boards need to read this. You know, we have got too many boards who are dominated often by white men who think their opinions are superior. Councils, government, we need to understand that the quiet ones have got something to say. Yeah.
I think there was someone in a session that I ran in the weekend, and he came up to me afterwards and said, thank you for putting that. I only presented on what I call the 4 qualities of better in the book, and one of them is about simplification and not oversimplifying things, allowing complex issues to be discussed as though they are complex issues. And he came up afterwards and said, oh, can I just bottle you? And I said, oh, that's a nice question. But he was a speaker and presenter in the corporate world and leadership in particular, and he said, I've spent like 2 decades trying to articulate what you just did better than that in, you know, the 10 minutes of that part of your presentation. He said, I'm going to be quoting you.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I didn't just, you know, plan it into my speech wonderfully. It was, you know, I couldn't have spoken about it like that, I don't think, if I hadn't written the book first, but he thought it was a good articulation of.
Did your view change during the book? Did you any opinions change as you got them down?
I think when I started writing, I was there was a lot more wishful thinking going on, and I still think there's a bit of idealism in there. That's going to take more than just this book or, you know, a few enlightened leaders or whatever to actually change what are some quite strong cultural forces, even around things like the extroverted ideal, which isn't an idea of mine, but Susan Cain's. But I think it's validating to see A, how much it's resonating with people, but B, how I'm almost having to do the journey that the book kind of encourages, because I am one of the quiet, considered slow to talk, cautious about sharing my views people, who has to now, if she wants to have an impact with these ideas, has to put herself and push herself out there, hence doing a presentation in the weekend, my first of ever. So to then be in the room with people who, in this case on Saturday, they were professional speakers, and I'm speaking as a very non-professional speaker, in fact, someone who avoids speaking at all costs, and doesn't find that the easiest way to communicate ideas, to then have such, positive feedback afterwards, and that's nice anyway, but it's not that was nice to be complimented afterwards that actually had an impact for me. It was this is real. This, I have an incredible colleague, Verity, who is trained in musical theatre, and she's done years and years of debating, and she comes across so differently to how I do, especially in a speaking kind of, or on video actually, sense. And it's taken me a long time to decouple from the idea that that's how you do those channels. So yeah, I think in some ways it was a bit of a proving right, but there were probably some other, you asked me what opinions or ideas shifted or changed for me. There were some too. I was really careful the whole way through, though, not to suggest in any way that the quiet and considered were better than the loudmouths or the extroverts, either, because some of my favourite people are loudmouthed extroverts, and they are sharp and they are clever, and I value their contribution and what they say. I just want these other people that we're not hearing from now to value theirs and have theirs valued as well, I think.
There's a podcast went up today from the Institute of Directors.
Oh, yes.
And that was one of our members, Maria King, being interviewed.
Cool.
She took a lot. We had to convince her or push her to do it. She did not want to do it.
Oh, what was her main reluctance or hesitation?
Same as yours. So she's a professional director. She's a young woman, a professional director, absolutely brilliant. She's a country girl off a dairy farm in Northland. And
Humble, probably.
And she's out in the wild, and she's very broadly smart in so many different areas. And she had to push the boat out. Mm. And so that's just gone live today.
Wow.
And we're going, look at you, Maria. And she sent something through this morning, first thing for me to critique before she put it up, because she wanted to put a written piece there, because
yes.
all that stuff. But, the thing is, I'm not sure if it's just New Zealand, but I get frustrated that we hear too much from too few. Mm. And I feel in some ways it's lazy that the journalists or whoever don't cast their net wide enough.
No.
Because most of the fantastic work done are by the 98% of people who have never been heard of. And we focus on maybe 2%, I don't know what the percentage is, and we get their views way too much. And so I think there is, so as yesterday, that last half hour, we heard different views.
Got some gems.
And got some gems from it that were not going to be said. And so I think there's two things here. One, supporting people, like with Maria, and you'd never pick it if you met her. Like, she's incredibly competent, confident, articulate, right? But putting her voice out into the world, she was like, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. And you were like, well, Maria, you've got an obligation, actually. The world needs to hear from you.
Absolutely. There's this sort of fear of, I think, sticking our head above the parapet, and we've seen people be cancelled and criticised for doing that in the wrong way. So even though we are so far, we go too far to the other extreme of worrying about that. But we're selling our ideas short, but we're stopping other people from being able to benefit from them as well. So, there's a speaking coach a trainer that I've done lots of work with over the years, he's been a client of ours as opposed to the other way around, which is probably what needs to happen now. But I've absorbed lots from him over the years in looking at his content, and he talks about the sort of the duty or obligation that you have to the ideas, to tell them well and to articulate that and share that. We've got a very similar purpose in just going about it in different ways.
Yeah.
But he said, you are almost the vehicle, the conduit, and matter actually a bit less than you think.
And I reflect on, because I often ask people, tell me what makes a good communicator, right? What do you think? What do you think a good communicator? What are the aspects of a good communicator?
Well, I think they are might be a bit biased, but I think they're considered, thoughtful. They bring in, it's those 4 qualities, which are, they treat complex things as though they are complex. So stay away from the binary sort of oversimplification. I think we, at one stage we thought we were doing better if we could see the second side, the other side of an issue or an argument, and we think, oh, look at us with our broad perspectives. But there's actually rarely only 2 sides. So we pat ourselves on the back for that at the kind of exclusion of everything else. I think they're people who, the second one is uncertainty, and so they're people that can admit the sort of edges of what they know or what they're sure about and be okay to still speak about things that they are working on and working out. So sharing almost on their way to being good ideas as well. And that's because when we do that, we invite others in. So they are collaborative and they are inclusive and they are inquiring, and I think they are sort of humbly. I love this. There's this term around intellectual humility, and I love that idea too. Like, we are allowing ourselves to be challenged, but we're also showing the growth and the journey we go on. I think it's really common to bury all our earlier efforts or examples of our thinking. Like the examples I gave recently were, how we cringe if someone says they've looked at our website and we know we haven't updated the content for a while, or we might see ourselves on video and
or listen to your voice on a podcast.
Exactly. We're gonna hear this in 5 years' time, and it's quite common to go, oh, what on earth was I thinking or talking about? And you kind of want to pretend that none of that ever happened, and you've always been as wise as you are now. But actually we aren't, and we're learning all the time. I think we need to own that a little bit more, show people a bit more loudly and proudly that our thinking is being updated and we're taking on feedback and we're evolving, and far from undermining the trust that others have in us because we didn't know it all before. I think we build trust by showing that all of that stuff is robust.
I shared a couple of slides at the beginning yesterday with this presentation, and around our methodology and stuff. It's pretty sharp.
Nice.
And somebody said, that's really cool. I said, yeah, I did it yesterday morning. So it's taken us 17 years to get this together. I said, you're just lucky that, I said, you're either going to see nothing because it didn't exist yesterday, but now it does.
Yeah.
And I'm showing it to you, so just letting you know that it's hot off the press and it's taken us 17 years to put it together.
Wow. And what sort of reaction did it
People
get?
are just going, oh, and because the thing is that, and I also, look, I was asked to speak at this thing initially, and then I said, oh, fuck, I'm a boring speaker. Don't do that. Let me facilitate something, because I don't like speaking.
That's
I've
good.
gone off speaking. And I just, so if I do get asked to speak, I go, cool, as long as I can interact with the crowd.
Yes.
So in the end, facilitated this session. But just saying, I'm no expert, I don't know how to make your world better, and I'm here to stimulate some conversation.
Because you probably do.
Maybe,
No, but I'm saying, like, you're saying, I don't know how to make your world better, but those people do.
Yeah, they do.
Exactly, with your your kind of encouragement and
so
seeds.
let's do it together. Another thing from your book, you just reminded me, was at the end, I had 2 questions come up. So I was winding it down. I was on time. For somebody who is totally disorganised and intuitive and so forth, I like starting on time. I like finishing on time. If I'm presenting, it's a thing, right?
Yes.
You should do it. And so I am 7 minutes before the end, and I'm telling them I'm winding it down, and somebody puts their hand up, and I thought, oh, I can't ignore it. So I went, yes. And they asked this big opening up question. And I went, cool, great question. And I said, and I'm just, great question, and we're moving on.
Wow.
And she was like, what?
You're not going to answer the question?
And I said, no. I said, and she was a bit perturbed. And I said, no, don't worry. You've asked the question, it's unfinished, and you'll remember it. So it's not going away. And that came from your book as well.
It's unresolved.
It's unresolved. And I thought, I said, don't worry, you don't. I said, if I tidied this all up for you, you'd forget it. And I said, to be clear, I can't. But I said, it's cool, it's work in progress, do your work.
Nice.
So that came from the book as well.
Awesome.
No, I don't need to indulge myself here. Awesome. And I finished on time.
Well
but it's I think, so coming back to the question about what's a great communicator, I think they're great listeners. And see, I've noticed with you, when we've talked online, you're a great listener. I remembered I made a comment about consciousness. Do you remember it?
I think so.
And I made a comment about consciousness, and consciousness is tiring. And you wrote it down. and it was like
an avid note taker.
And you just went, and I thought, there you go. So that's what I also picked up on the book, is the amount of research in here. Like, it's pretty dense. It is. A car chase in there would have been good, maybe. But it is. It's pretty dense. So I read it slowly because 10 pages and I was sort of getting pretty full. Yeah,
and you've got to mull the bits, and I think it's a thoughtful book. But it's funny you say about the research, Harv, because it can be a real blocker to getting started.
Yep.
And to doing the work, and I think just sharing our ideas, whether that's starting to write a book or actually even just putting anything out there or agreeing to speak or whatever your opportunity for sharing is. And it was actually there was another client of ours in our small group program, like book writing program with me, and he was the one that called me on it, actually, because I know that one of my forms of reluctance is I need all the information first. Like, I'm waiting to be able to sort it all perfectly and have it click in, and then I'll know it and it'll be clear. But actually, very rarely is anything that clear. I live in a mess of overthinking. So I was showing up to these weekly calls, and I had retired my coach of the group hat to actually sit in there as a participant alongside these other clients. One of my colleagues was coaching it. And so I'm saying, and I've read this book and that book, and I made some notes on this, and I revisited the notes that I had on this earlier book, and he basically called me on my bullshit and said, you need to trust what you know now. Like, stop, you're lost down a rabbit hole of research. And so I approached it by actually putting all of that aside. The research came in later, and it had to, because I know about myself that I'll put more stock in what everyone else is saying and use that to shape the argument than actually asserting anything that I wanted to say. So I was like, all the research parked over there, and the reading and the notes. And I was like, I need to write what I need it to say first, and then I can pull the bits as and when, or as they're actually going to help and strengthen it, I'll pull it back in what I need. And it was the only way I could have got there, I think.
I got the impression as I was reading, I thought it would have been far easier for you not to have written this book than to write it.
Yeah, definitely.
So that came through loud and clear. And because what the book is actually you not turning up. So I'm not surprised that somebody gave you a kick in the arse to actually get over it. Like, it reminded me, and it comes back to this conference I talked at yesterday called AFRA. I'm not sure what it stands for. Anyway, it represents all the food waste people in the country, a hugely important thing. Here's something I learnt yesterday. New Zealand is the only country monitored by the United Nations where our food insecurity is going up. Our food security is dropping.
Wow.
We're the only country in the world with that.
Wow.
Isn't that terrible? Anyway, so a good friend of mine, Deborah Manning, maybe 14, 15 years ago, lives in Dunedin. Mm-hmm. She'd quit being a lawyer and she wanted to get into this food waste and stopping food waste go to landfill and different stuff. Anyway, Deb's a detailed person, and she had spent 6 months researching, getting their policies and procedures together. I think she'd been to Australia and checked them out over there and looked at that, and she'd got all the documentation together. And it was her brother, who was chair of the board, said, "So you're going to pick up any waste now?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Said, "We actually have to do something."
Absolutely.
And it was just like, oh yeah, that's right, we need to do the thing. And like it is one of the bigger in the country now, and is in Auckland here and Dunedin,
awesome.
Queenstown. It's unfortunately it's flourished. It needed to flourish. It is a sign of a failing system. But yeah, it reminded me of that.
Call it procrastinating.
Yeah.
It's actually can be a form of avoidance.
Yeah. I wish I had a little bit of that. Sometimes I start things a little bit too soon.
That's why you need the other kind of people in your life too. My colleague calls me the handbrake, because she has big ideas and she's ready and she's foot to the floor all the time. And I'm the, well, hang on, have we thought of, or what about, or I get that you want to do this, but let's actually make sure we can make it good. And it's not a very endearing nickname,
I was
but
going to say,
fitting.
I don't like the term. It's a bit negative. I've got, so the slides that I put up yesterday,
yes,
I didn't do them. Right, I would have never done them.
What did you do then?
Well, I work with this magnificent woman, Lara, who is not a handbrake, but I talk about riffing. And Lara is a synthesizer, and
nice.
she is brilliant at it. And just, I watch her and then stuff comes out.
Awesome.
She takes a long time to process, doesn't like to be at the forefront of things, but she makes me feel a lot more secure. And and we riff. Nice. And I know I'm good for her and she's good for me. And so that would be my pushback on the handbrake. And going, nah.
I think synthesize is a nicer term.
Yep. It's because synthesizing it's a superpower. It's a superpower, and that's Lara's. And because that's what you've done in this book.
That's what I wanted to do with the book, is I wanted to show people that some of those traits that they kind of are undervaluing, and that not just they are undervaluing, but we as a whole are sort of undervaluing, they are superpowers. Like, those are the more complex nuanced thinkers that will approach things with, room for others to contribute and collaborate too.
Yep.
They're going to get to the better outcomes.
Look, we've found that with collective intelligence over and over again. So our teams are around 10 people in size, and the introverts are okay in that size space, and the extroverts, so it works for both. But so often, so I'm going to go back. So I think another thing with great communicators is they don't use many words. They're very, very sparse on words. And if you think of Gandhi and of some of the great communicators over time, I'd imagine Jesus. I'm not religious, but I think everything I've read about Jesus, I'm going, the guy seemed to have his shit together, and is very
knew some stuff,
and very, very good at getting, and I think there is a part of that as well, that good communicators don't use many words.
Well, you watch. I mean, we're not talking about parenting here specifically, Harv, but that is prime parenting advice too. Is the more words you string together in an instruction or in a lecture, let's say, they're going to turn off. If you want your point to land, fewer words possible. And I have little boys, and that's especially the case, but I don't think it's just limited to boys. It's all of them. You go on too long and they're gone.
Yep. And I cocked up yesterday with some instructions. My first instruction for the day, I wanted them to do two things, and the first thing I used twice as many words as
you over-explained
I should have. Yep. And people were like, "What is it?" And because then I'd give them two things. So the first one they got, second one was really clear and short.
But they're
then,
still trying to figure out what you were saying with the first one.
And so I had to go around to half the room, and I just thought, there you go. I used too many words.
There you go.
So that's I think, it's so the book is dense. I'm pleased it wasn't longer, because I thought, and so the question is there a next book coming through?
Maybe. No plan just yet, but maybe.
Because some of the things I like with people like Malcolm Gladwell and thinkers like that is that I'm always waiting for the sequel.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's just at the moment we're just doing a resting phase.
Yes, I have to land. One of my clients gave me the advice of, before you look for the next mountain to climb, she said, I know you and I know what you'll do, but before you lift your eye from the, this horizon line and look for the next mountain to climb, please just arrive here first. Land here first. And I think there's, I would do a disservice to this one if I didn't spend some time sharing about what's it. Just writing it wasn't enough. And so I actually had this realization when I was trying to write what I was going to say at the launch event, which was just a small thing here in Auckland. And, I've written the book. I've spent 12 months with these ideas, or to be honest, a bit longer. And I'm trying to sort of extend them or add to them or say something, even more clever at the launch. And then I thought, hang on a minute. Nobody else has read the book yet. You're only just you don't need to add what's on the end, because they're not there. You've got to come right back to the beginning, and you've got to start talking about it as though it's new for them, and that's really hard because you're bloody sick of
you're over it,
what you've just been going on about for all this time in your head. But that's the reminder, and I think that's why I'm also trying to not rush past to the next thing.
Did you enjoy it?
Enjoying is maybe not the first word I would have chosen. There's nothing that rivals it for rewarding, but it wasn't all enjoyable. It was hard work, and there were times that I really did need to be talked down off the ledge and or picked back up off the floor to kind of keep going and bother doing it and bother finishing it. So it wasn't all enjoyable, but there's nothing that rivals it in terms of how rewarding it is. And the personal growth aspect of writing a book like this, a really deep thinking, my best representation of these ideas sort of book, that does grow you.
Okay, so let's just talk about the 4 elements here.
Okay.
All right? Mm-hmm. So just talk us through those and why those.
The 4 qualities. I came a very long detour to get to those, and I won't take you on the whole detour, but there's a lot that gets written for a book that doesn't end up in a book. And one of those things was I had these archetypes of reluctance. So everyone that I talk to has some form of reluctance about thought leadership. And, as we define in there's some problems with that as a definition, and it's got a bit of baggage. And what I actually think thought leadership opens the space up much more widely than that. But whether people are what you would consider successful thought leaders or just starting out on their journey, all of them have some forms of reluctance. And they fell into these 4 sort of themes or categories. Had these 4 archetypes of reluctant thought leaders. You won't find them in there because they're not actually in the book. But there was the overthinking.
I'm so pleased you said that because I was thinking...
Holy, did I miss that?
No,
they're not. They're not in there. They are the overthinkers. They are the nothing specials.
Yep.
So, overthinking is kind of that procrastinated learning, and I need all the information, and I have all the complicated stuff. I can't distill it back down to something that can be digested or shared, because it's all good and it's all relevant and it's all important. The nothing specials is sort of the, I didn't really add anything or do anything here. Anyone else would have done that same thing in those same conditions. There is one about, there's just the shy one, the sort of, can't be me. And then there's this sort of servant thought leader as well, who they might be doing some of the work of thought leadership, but they're not leveraging it very well because they sort of see influence as too closely akin to manipulation, or they wouldn't want to exploit any of their, or leverage, I call it leverage, they call it exploit, the relationships they have. So they do this sort of disservice, they stay small because they don't want to self-serve, even though they kind of downplay the value in what they've got. So then someone challenged me, well, what happens on the other side of those? Like if you took those 4 as sort of this end of the extreme or the continuum, and what's down the other end? And I was like, well, you've got loud and showy, and you've got, everything that I say is more important than everyone else's. And you've got sleazy sales kind of speak, probably. And I was like, that's actually all the stuff that we're rallying against here. And so I started thinking about whether there was is there a middle ground? Like, is there a sweet spot? I was toying with the sweet spot for a while. And I said, no, but the sweet spot is a bit too, it feels too restrictive as well, because it's like there's a place and that's the place. I said, it's less of a spot and more of like a giant circus tent that you can roam around in. You could be in quite different places of the tent, but it's still perfectly serviceable. And so I couldn't find a way to put that, and like it was taking me sideways from where I wanted to go with what I was saying here. Trying to work out how to come back to how did that then become the 4 qualities? It was trying to find then, if you were in how do you know you are in a useful, functional, it's like any trait can be overplayed or underplayed, but how do you know you're in the good range, I guess, of it? And that's where the qualities emerged from, was if you can treat complex things as complex and not feel the need to obscure all the bits that don't suit you, then that's, the right amount of nuanced thinking. It's not so far in the grey that you can't get anything sensible out of your mouth or onto the page, but it's also not spiffy sound bites that just have nothing behind them. And then uncertainty, that was about, so there's, invite and embrace complexity, acknowledge uncertainty. That's that whole, you don't need to pretend to know everything or profess to know everything, the sage on the stage, but also trust and value that you know enough. There is some stuff you do know, and be sort of secure and safe in that to be able to then explore the edges. Embrace complexity, acknowledge uncertainty, share it then in a collaborative, inclusive, inviting way, which kind of, that naturally does flow on from where you express uncertainty, because if people are leaving some room, others will come to fill it. We are not very likely to come arguing full force against someone that already professes to know it all. We sometimes do, but it's not such a welcoming place. And then the last one is allow your thinking to evolve. So show the way. That's what I mentioned before. It actually builds trust as opposed to eroding it if you can show the journey that you're going on and take people on it too. There's a reference in there, Greg McKeown and his book Effortless, and that was his second book, and in the introduction he writes this whole bit about the dilemma he had with the thinking of his first book, and instead of destabilizing, undermining him because he said, actually I was doing all of that and it still wasn't quite working, he showed me where, how his thinking had moved on since then and where he was taking us in the second book. So you went with him. And I think, we learn more that way.
And so this is why the book resonated so much, because so many of those things are our work at Collective Intelligence. So complexity, for instance, is what we tackle with diverse groups is complexity. And a diverse team is actually a waste of time if you are dealing with something that's not complex, like it's using a big hammer on something. It's just but one of the things that we've worked out is that we want people who have been through the program to recognise complexity for what it is. And for instance, if we use Trump as an example, right? And so people would like to simplify the Trump situation, right? Right or wrong, he says, actually the Trump phenomenon is profoundly complex and is steeped in history and evolution of that society and a whole raft of things.
Absolutely.
Trump is just a pimple and amongst this great big complex. 60-something million people voted for him.
Pimple's a good, interesting choice.
Right, but it's such a, but it's and it would be so easy to go, he's bad, or he's good. Yeah. Well, that's having a simple question to a complex. And
it's almost meaningless.
It's almost meaningless, yep. And then complexity itself, the world is becoming more complex, and so how do we deal with complexity? And that's why we love our work so much, but dealing with complexity, one, recognising it, and then how do you deal with it? And then the other thing we work with the teams is getting them used to uncertainty and sitting in that discomfort and sitting and sitting and sitting there.
Nice.
And the longer you can sit there, the better, without going, I need to know the answer. And it's amazing how often a solution or an answer will turn up after 2 days, will turn up in the last half hour from nowhere.
Well, there's that Einstein quote, isn't there? That's
Yeah.
something about if I had a problem and I had 2 days to solve it or whatever, in your case, I'd spend, 99% of that time
coming up with the
understanding
question.
the question. Yeah.
So that's something that people really struggle with, new members when they come in, and they're going, "Oh, I know the answer." And I go, "We're not here for that,"
Is that some unlearning of, behavioural conditioning on their part that has to happen?
Sometimes insecurity, sometimes going, "This is really uncomfortable, and I want to become comfortable."
Well, we're wired to not. It's threatening, and we're wired to avoid threat. So.
And I'll get some brownie points till I come up with the
Yeah,
answer.
it's hard to sit in
Could
it.
you imagine us going through school now, and going, and I think kids are being educated way better than certainly my generation was.
I can
'cause
see it.
My generation was like, just answer the fucking question.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit how you think.
Know these, remember them, so that I can test you on them later and you
And
can
when
get
I
them
ask you a
right.
question, you just plonk down the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Collaboration. So it's funny. I've also got a theory that the people who talk about shit a lot don't do it. So the people who talk about collaboration, we should collaborate on this, right? Collaborators don't use the word collaboration.
No,
they just
no.
do stuff.
Yeah,
They just
collaboratively.
they just do it. So anyway, and the evolution thing is very much our process as well, because before COVID, and it's coming back round again, before COVID, our average members stayed with us for 7 years.
Wow.
And that makes sense to us because we're not interested in short-term gains
No.
because they don't stack. So the longer-term gains stack. And so that's why going through those 4, it was like, yep, I can relate to all of these.
I knew when you first told me about what you do that there was some synergy there.
100%. And I think, this as your book as a resource now, that's something that we'll be using is to help prepare people coming into collective intelligence. I think would be hugely beneficial to read this.
Wow.
The other one is Radical Ideas by Matthew Syed. That's my favourite book because I got so many jollies out of it because he just talked about collective intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
And I emailed him after the book and said, "Hey, and he did reply nicely, but it never went any further. But I forgive him for that. But Matthew Syed's book, I think, is up there as far as being a resource for people to understand what we do,
Nice.
because that for that we call it cognitive diversity. Because diversity by itself, diversity achieves nothing. It's got to be cognitive, and it's got to have some curation, and it's got to have space, and it's got to allow the quiet voices to be heard, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So it takes a lot of the subtle stuff. Without the subtle stuff, it doesn't work.
So books like that one that you've mentioned then are almost like a primer to what you're then going to do with them.
Yep.
In a
Yeah, it would help. I don't want to use the word condition.
shift the mindsets.
I think
open up some
it's
stuff.
just a preparation for it, because and we're getting clearer now that we want to start measuring the skill development.
Nice.
We've never done that before, and I'm hoping. So Maria King, who I mentioned before, is looking to do a PhD with us.
Oh wow!
To start researching some of our findings, which we've never done.
Amazing.
And when she rang me and said, "Can we do a PhD together?" and I went, "No."
You can.
You do it. I'll watch. I'll help. So there is, and so this helped build on my knowledge for our work.
Thank you.
Christina, what else would you like to cover today?
I think the other thing I'd just like people to understand is that how universal the reluctance is. The imposter syndrome, how loudly the inner critic calls when you're doing this sort of stuff. There's a whole chapter basically about that. But when I think about the work that I do as well with people, there's a lot of encouraging and permission granting almost, and but I want to do it something this way, or I'm not sure about this thing, and gentle kind of coaxing and nudging and things. And I'd love people to need less encouragement or be less derailed by all those kind of critical voices in their heads, because they're holding you back or keeping you small, but and we all miss out when that happens, but they're also not a sign that you're on the wrong path or that you're doing the wrong thing or that you shouldn't be pushing further, because they're actually telling you that you're onto something, that you care, because if you didn't, they wouldn't be there, and that, you need to keep going.
The 4 archetypes you talked about earlier, I'm number 4.
The servant one, the hard to, you might be doing some stuff, but you're maybe keeping it smaller because you wouldn't want to lean on that network of people or, that opportunity to say something.
Yep. And I'm growing out of it.
Good.
But that was very much alive in me. When I started Collective Intelligence, it started to gather some momentum, and people started joining who surprised me, and I almost derailed it, sabotaged it, because of my discomfort. You can lean too far, I think, into that wanting to give value, and it's a reaction that comes because we can see and cringe when we see the people who are not doing that. They're out there tooting their own horns and scrambling for sales or whatever it is that they're doing, and it's hollow and it's transparently in service of just that. Yep.
So I think our reaction to that is, I've got to make sure I give lots of value and I deliver value. And we do, and we are, but we can also take that too far. You aren't a not-for-profit. You're allowed to benefit from the things that benefit others. And in fact, you should, because you want to be able to sustain what you're doing to actually be able to have a really significant impact. And so if you go out of business doing it, then nobody wins. I think it's, that social enterprise model is fantastic for that, because it's got to commercially make sense. We always ask people whether they're writing a book or whatever else impact activities they're doing, what impact do you want this to have for the people you're here for? They find that really easy to answer. What impact do you want it to have for you? And we're not here writing them we don't write lead gen books and we don't churn them out in 30 days and it's none of that. But it should still serve you as well.
Yep. Getting that balance.
Yeah.
Yep. Christina, good luck with the book going forward, and that I hope it opens doors for people to have conversations.
Me too.
And where can people buy the book?
There is a link on our website, but it's also available through Mighty Ape. It's on Amazon as a ebook and print on demand as well. So people outside of New Zealand should definitely buy it that way, because our shipping is painful from New Zealand.
The book is called Better by Christina Wedgwood, easy to remember and find. Christina, thank you for writing this and making the effort and stepping up and promoting the voice of a big segment of community. And I hope this is used as a long-term resource for people to, just have the courage to go, I need to step up and have a voice. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks for talking to me about it today too.
Pleasure. Good luck.
Thanks, Ab.